Good evening, everyone. It's Sunday evening, May 18th, 2025. You're joining me for session 2 of City of Six Moons, a very unusual puzzle of a game, framed as a game from an alien civilization whose instructions are only explained in symbols, and our task is to try to understand the rules, and then perhaps play a game. Let me just check in with the chat. YouTube says there are 9 concurrent viewers, 1 like. So we have a very small group here today, which is just fine. In fact, I don't think I was able to interact very usefully with the chat during the first session, which was 2 days ago. No, yesterday. Yesterday afternoon. So, but I do want to say a few things about this game before we get started. I did learn about it many months ago, and I mentioned it on a Tabletop Mystery Game News segment that I did. And then shortly after that, Greg actually said at some point, maybe as far back as a year ago, I can't remember when, but he said, I just heard about a game that I think you might be interested in. That was the second point of confirmation. And then very recently in the Discord for a group called Kudo Plays, which is the local board game design group in Champaign, Chris, one of the organizers of Kudo Plays, mentioned it again, that he had started going through it. And so that was, I thought, finally, yes, I should pull the trigger on it. And I've purchased it. It's a small little indie game. I believe I had to order it through the publisher. The designer of the game, who is listed as Amabel Helene, actually recorded a video on YouTube talking a little bit about it and the inspirations from some video games that I have heard about but don't remember the names offhand, but also inspired by just an experience of buying a foreign language board game, Scotland Yard board game, I believe, and trying to learn it from the rule book while not understanding the language. And you can see abstractly why this is a very cool idea. In practice, it is also a cool idea. And I find it very compelling. It's like one of those things that gets its hooks in you, and it's hard to, it's almost a little addictive. You don't want to stop trying to figure out the rules. So I am finding it a very entertaining puzzle. But I do think we should talk a little bit about whether it is a proper puzzle. And I don't think it quite is. But it's a small enough scale that I think it's okay. But let me explain what I mean by that. I think, well, let me take a step back. What we're going to do today is we're going to go back over the entire rule book, and I'm going to lay out what I think I understand, my best guesses for things, try to note what I don't yet understand. Maybe we can talk about areas that you disagree with me or any thoughts you have on the things that I don't understand. I think we'll spend a little bit more time on today's session looking at the cards. And then I hope what we'll try to do is actually try to play as much of the game as we can to see if we don't get some more insights in the course of trying to play it about what some of the things might do or might not do. So that's my plan for today. I expect there will be a third session. And I think maybe after the second session, we'll have to decide how much we want to go read other posts about it. I haven't read any as of yet because I don't want to get spoiled. But at some point when we reach the end of our tether here, it may help to get insights from other people. If you spend a lot of time thinking about that, about this game, and you're watching this, you might want to leave some comments on the video afterwards, but not spoil anything during this stream. I feel like this second stream is the stream where I've had a little bit of time to think about it, a day to think about it while doing some other things. But after this, I'd be happy to talk collaboratively. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about whether this should be considered a fair puzzle. And I think from looking at the rule book and puzzling through some of it, it pays to acknowledge that I don't think it's quite a fair logic puzzle, in that if you were expecting this to be a fair logic puzzle and you're going through the rule books, I mean, I've scanned and printed out the pages of the rule book here, and we'll look at the real thing. But if you were designing this to be a really fair puzzle, then you would have to design it in a way that somewhere in the rules are resolutions of any ambiguities. And why I say I don't think it's quite going to end up being a fair puzzle, maybe I should get the real rule book when I walk through it, is going to be, let's get the real rule book. They're going to be things that we're just going to have to make an educated guess to fill in around the ambiguities. Okay, so you should probably watch the first live stream or some other video on the game, because I don't want to go over everything again, but here are the components: cards, board, rule book, pieces. But to finish my thought, we are going to make sense as best we can of all the rules. But I think we're going to find, here's a perfect example. This is, in fact, my prime example. We're going to find cases where the rules look something like this, where it's mostly told through examples and iconography. And it feels to me like there are several places where we've got an example showing something like this. And even when we figure out exactly what it's trying to suggest, I feel like you could look at this and say, well, is it saying that a blue card must be next to a red card? Is it saying a blue card must be next to a flipped red card, which has been upgraded to yellow? And then, of course, what is it saying to do, etc. But it's that first part I want to hammer in on. There aren't enough examples, and there's no clarifying text to answer that question. There is no answer to the question, can it only be combined with a upgraded flipped red card, which is yellow? Can it only be a blue 1 card combined with a red 2 card? Or can it be a blue 3 card? These are ambiguities that have no explicit answer. And I think whether you view that as a positive part of the puzzle, that we're going to have to bring in some domain knowledge about board games and rules, which I think we will. That's the second piece of this puzzle. But I think you're just going to have to accept that this is not a complete fair logic puzzle where everything has an answer. Whereas if you were presenting a sort of puzzle to someone, you might want to be able to say, this is a logic puzzle, and you're going to see examples of everything so that you could deduce the rules. I do not believe these rules can be deduced using deductive logic. We're going to have to bring in some common sense. We're going to have to make some assumptions, and we're going to have to bring in board game knowledge to figure out the best way to interpret something so that it creates a game, a playable game. All right. Is there anything else to talk about before we get started here? I've said what I plan to do this session. I don't know how long this will go, a couple hours. I do want to give some thanks to a couple of people in the Co-op for Two Discord, which you can jump in and join if you like. Rob prepared a little spreadsheet of the symbols so we could try to get a handle on that, and Arsene was in there discussing it. And I do want to, I guess I had two other points that I wanted to mention before we get started in terms of coming to grasps with the game. I do think part of the challenge, a major part of the challenge in understanding the rules, has to do with one concept of this alien language, not a totally alien concept to human language, which is the same word being used in different ways. And we get a little bit of a clue about that from the back of the box. And I do want to read the back of the box and the notes for any clues. But okay, civilization building game for a single player. Civilization building, I do think we're seeing elements of engine building in this game, and it helps to have some familiarity with engine building in deducing and guessing the rules. Okay, single player game. I watched them play it once. Only one of them moved the pieces, doing so silently. Okay, that part's not important, but single player game. Now, I chose to translate the title as City of Six Moons, though I think this is at best a clumsy approximation. This glyph is probably closer to city-state, but that feels clunky in the mouth. It also means laws or rules. It also means culture and measure. It also means story or legend. It might mean game, but that's conjecture. Okay, so there's our first clue to something that definitely seems to be true. You cannot assign a single word to some of these symbols. Some of these symbols have far-reaching meanings. And again, that's not something totally alien in English and other human languages, although for a rule book, you try to avoid that as much as possible. And we got a little mention here. This is probably means 6, which it does mean in most cases, but then she says, but in this case, there's 2 dots. Why are there 2 dots here? We don't know. But again, another sign that maybe some subtleties to the symbols could tweak their meaning. This is definitely moon, but I'm not sure what is meant by moon. It's also used to denote a passage of time. Could correlate to a month or whatever. Moons might also refer to smaller satellite polities brought into the city's orbit, conquest or trade. When I watched the game being played, it concluded abruptly and was scored when the 6th disc was claimed. It's a little bit confusing, but when you look at the rules, but I think I have a better idea of that. Let's see. Could not find any reference to the game end condition in the rules, and I'll confess it doesn't make sense to me from a game design perspective. It wouldn't allow you to maximize your score. So would disincentivize you from expansion. Perhaps it's a folk rule of some sort or some cultural assumption. Now, I do want to read that again because I could not find any reference to this game end condition. It's not that she can't find reference to a game end. I can't find reference to this game end condition when the 6th disc was claimed. Now, I don't even know what it means to claim a disk here, but okay, maybe we'll come back to that. And then let's reread this note on production, which is mostly just saying how the pieces we have in front of us don't match the pieces that this person saw the aliens playing. And I do note that this is backwards from the way we would read it. So city, moons, 6. 6 moons, city. Played for thousands of years. No interpretation of the rules rebalanced anything, even when I think the design might be improved. I'm still not sure why the rival civilizations track token track token accumulation separately. When I asked about this, they were quite upset. A little bit of disagreement about this is a statement that we don't really know exactly what this is. We don't really know which tracks are the rival civilization track tokens. So that's an interesting thing to think about. And then a little discussion about how the tokens could be stacked with transparent glass. We have a canvas mat. Doesn't really matter. The wooden disc should be played with delicate translucent shells, roughly the shape depicted on the cards. These are concave on the bottom, allowing them to stack atop another. Okay, so we're just stacking them with discs that are flat on the top and the bottom. In this case, they would only be flat on the bottom. Not sure, that doesn't seem like it would really affect gameplay, but in the original, they could meld the colors, but we only have one color. It is not uncommon to gently wave a light over the game while it's being played. As the light hits the shells, the colors bloom. But we don't even have that. I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't get a deluxe version remake at some point. Okay. Glass stones, they wouldn't stack. I considered changing the symbol on the cards and the rules so as to match the disc, but couldn't do it. Okay, so there you have it. All right, let me check in with the chat, and then I'll go over the rules and explain what I think I understand and what I don't. But anything else anyone wants to talk about before we get started here? Don't give me ideas for specific pages. Wait till we cover those pages. In fact, wait till I finish explaining all of my theories, and then we can go back through them and see if anyone disagrees. I would encourage you, like all of the games we play here, to take this seriously. So I do have a Google Docs note about each page in the rule book. Maybe we could use my printed version of the rules to annotate, but here's my little notes on the rules, on the rule book. I'll just keep that handy in case I need to look at it. All right, I'm just going to assume that the rest of you are here mainly to help fall asleep. All right. There's our board. There's our rule book. All right. First page is clearly a setup. And I'm going to try to remember a little bit about things we figured out between the first stream and now. But we've got two kinds of cards. We've got what we'll call the city cards here and the black cards here. Okay, this is page 1, and it's clearly walking us through different parts of the setup. Now, there's the board, and the first thing you can see is this is saying take 12 of the city cards, probably saying shuffle and lay them out, something like that, on their white sides. You can see there's actually 24, but they're broken into sets. They're broken into 2 sets. There's a 1 city. In fact, we should call this house. Let's try to be more disciplined about our naming. We're going to call the city the symbol that has all 3. That's city. So we're going to call this state. These are state symbols with 2 stacks. So we've got 12, 1, not state, house. That's easier to differentiate. We've got 12 house cards that are double-sided and 12 house 3 cards. These are house 1s that I'll explain later why we think this is upgrading them to their other side, much like you could imagine a engine building, city building game. These cards can all be upgraded. So these are the 1s can be upgraded to 2s with yellow on the back. The 3s can be upgraded to 4s. So this seems to be saying shuffle the 12 1s with their white side up and lay them out on the table in a row. I believe it's randomly. You could certainly, this goes back to the ambiguities, you could certainly imagine a world where we're supposed to lay them out exactly as shown in the rule book. I don't believe that, well, I don't know if there's an explicit answer to that. It's the only answer would come is if one of these rules says random. I don't believe it does though, but this could be shuffle randomly. Okay. So that's that first part of the setup. And then it's saying have a stack nearby of these. I'm going to argue that these are sort of for the second stage of the game after you finish the top row. But I'll explain why I think that later. Okay, now it says what to do with these black cards. Now, first thing to notice with the black cards is there are 4 different symbols. They match these symbols here, which I'm going to call resources, although if you think these are the alien tracks, you might think of these as the 4 different species. I think it's easier to think of these as resources. In fact, this entire board is basically resource tracking. We've got our 4 tracks. These are our 4 main resources, which you'll see we use to spend things. And then we've got some advanced resources here, is what I'm going to call them. And they can sort of be upgraded into these more advanced states. Then we've got this, which I think we're calling a tower. Then we've got what looks like an upgraded tower. And then we've got a little house here that's a little bit of a mystery to me. And I'll explain what I think these are in a second. But back to the setup. The setup is telling us how to initialize here our resources. And here's what it's saying to do. We take these cards. All right, notice all of these cards are basically the same. They use the same 4 symbols of resources. But there's a different, they all have unique around the edge. And then each card has 1 extra of a symbol. So they all have the same 4 around the edge in the same order, notice. They're all identical around the edge, but they have 4 cards. Each one has a duplicate of 1 of the symbols in the center. So I'm going to call this the sort of, we're either calling this the robot or the alien slave, but I think calling it the alien slave makes this more of a cultural, adds an element of danger here, so maybe that's what I'll prefer to use. Okay, so you can see one of the black cards has a duplicate alien in the center. Wheat, we're calling this brick or stone. You could imagine you would build a pyramid out of it. And this wood, sort of classic resources in a engine building, civilization building game. All right, so I believe this is saying something like, shuffle these 4 cards. I think shuffle, although this isn't quite the choose. I think this is the symbol for these kinds of cards, which are red and blue. A little hard to see the color here, but I think what we've got here is these are the red and blue cards, and these are these city cards. Okay, so what is it saying here? I believe what it's saying here is we're going to have, from these 4, we shuffle them randomly, and we take 2 of them, and this becomes our initial resource. This center here is our, I don't know if we just want to call it initial resource. I think we use it for other things as well. But okay, this is how we do our initial setup. We put these aside for a second, and we draw the 2 cards and line them up like so. And then we look at the center circle. And that's what we struggled a little bit to understand this setup, but I think it makes more sense now. So I'm going to do this part here. So here's what this instruction is. It's a little odd, but I think I understand it now. The part we struggled with is understanding what this bar here is. And let me see if I can explain what I believe this to mean now. It's saying, look at the circle, the inner circle here. The 6 symbols around this inner circle formed when you line these cards up together. All right. And this is an example set of cards here. And what it is saying is that the initial state of these 4 resources match the symbols around, the 6 symbols around the edge plus 1 that you choose. This is the choose symbol, I believe. So that's what we're looking at here. These 6 symbols are exactly the 6 symbols around the center circle plus 1 that's been added to the card of our choice. This is our initial creation of our engine, because that's what these 2 cards are going to be used for. They're going to be used to track the building of our engine. So essentially, we're going to choose one of these symbols that we're going to start out with our engine a little bit built up on. So I'm just going to mirror the example for a second and choose to start my engine out on stone. And then I initialize the resources on the board according to, in fact, let us copy the example. It'll be a little bit easier. There's our example 2 cards from the rule book. So basically, we take the 6 around here and initialize our resources with those 6. So 2 wheat, that's what the 2 triangles here, and that happens because we've got 2 triangles around the outside. 1 wood, 1 stone plus the extra stone that we initialized with. So that's 2 stone here. That's the choice that got made to initialize here. We could have put it on any of these 6, but we chose to put it here. And this is just what this is showing. This is just showing this is this. Okay, 2 alien slaves go there. Alien robot slaves go there. And then it is saying we also add 3 discs to the center tower resource there. So there's our initialization. 1 plus 1 is 2. Then there's 3, 2, and 2. Okay. Now it's saying, and this is the part I'm not 100% sure about, but what we've got is we've got 2 basic areas. This double vertical chain link symbol here. This is, to me, fairly clearly saying the remainder go here. I'm going to call this the supply, and I'm going to call this the pool. And it might pay to put a little written note on that so we don't confuse ourselves here. We don't forget. Call this the pool on the left, and the supply, which is basically like the rest of the pieces, are going to go here. And you'll see the instructions have us moving things from the pool to the pool, from the supply to the supply. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, now, this is clearly saying 6 discs go here. So there's no doubt in my mind that 6 discs go here. I'm going to put those 6 here. There's our 6 discs in the pool. And the remainder are going into the supply. That's clear to me. What's not 100% clear to me, though, and then it wants one of the red and blue clearly go off to the side here. Okay, that much is clear to me. The part that I'm not 100% on is this part. So I believe these are going to stay out. This is going to be what we're tracking our engine on. And we'll do other stuff there. The other 2 cards, however, are used for something else. I believe the way it works is we're going to take one of them, or put one of them aside. We're going to take our first one and we flip it. And in fact, I'm going to choose the one here that's in the example. This is this. So we've taken one of these cards and we flipped it. Now, here's the part I'm not, in fact, I'm not 100%. The black card's iconography is the part that I'm struggling with a little bit more in general. But here's the part where I'm already not sure. It's clearly telling us to put, in fact, this is the wrong order. Feels like it's just a trivial misprint, but it's not actually. It differs from this card, but this is the only one it could be. They've used the back of this card, but that's impossible. Well, okay. So you can't. Okay, I believe this is, I would almost consider this an error. But you're either, this back of this card is the back of this card in the example. But we need this to stay here. So I think that I'm assuming that we need to use these remainder cards, but it's possible, if this isn't an error, that it's telling us to just look at this card as our setup. But I believe this has to stay on the board face up, so I don't think we can do that. So I'm just going to assume that we're just going to pretend that this is the same as this card. Okay, but you can see it's a little different. Here, red is at the top. Here, blue is at the top. So here's the part I'm not 100% sure about. I believe this is going to stay out on the table. It seems to be suggesting that we put 6 discs here. Although you can see this has got 6 and then a tower. So I'm not sure about that, but this seems to be suggesting 6. Now, here's the part I'm already not sure about, though. It could be that we do this initialization and then we bring these here There's 6 discs that go here, and here's the blue and red. So one possibility is that this is the second set of blue and red, and this is a second set of 6. Or it's telling us that we initialize with this and then we move these here. Now, because my interpretation of the rules is that we're going to be taking from this card, I'm going to assume that these are 2 separate sources and that this should just stay on the table. In fact, it's going to have to stay out of the way. So let's put it all the way over. This is a bit of a table hog, this game. I'm going to put these over here. Okay, so that's our initialization complete. I feel fairly good about that. That's page 1. Again, I've read this as random, but it could mean, in fact, let's just mix some of these up a little bit. But it could be that it's supposed to be in a specific order. I believe it would be most likely for a game to randomize. Okay, we've got a random initial set up here of resources. We've chosen which resource to start off strong with. We've got a little bit of a random starting card here. I'm going to explain how I think that's used. Okay, page 2. I feel like we had a pretty good understanding of these pages 2 and 3 from our last session, but let me go over what we've got here. So this is obviously describing the board. I don't feel like this is giving you that much information. It feels like you could almost do away with this, but basically it's saying that you're gaining cubes from when you gain something onto a resource, it's normally coming from a pool. When you spend stuff, it's going back into the supply. And the resources are being used to exchange for things, spend things to buy things. I think that's basically what's happening. I don't think this is all that useful. All right, now we get to taking turns. And you can see this looks like it's going to be the symbol for taking a turn. And then this, I'm going to argue, is between turns. Okay, so on your turn, you can basically do one of 2 things. You can play a card, or you can play a pawn. There's the symbol that I think means choose. So you can choose on a turn, you can choose to play a card, you can choose to play a pawn. And you're going to see, this is an engine builder. There's multiple ways to use cards and then multiple ways to trigger cards once they get built onto the table. So let's go over this using a card. So when you use a card as your action, let's just take one. It's not clear if you can just take randomly then, but let's just take a card here. Let's say, well, no, let's look for the one let's try to copy one. Here it is. Here's the card that they've chosen in their example. Okay, so if you're used to engine builders or card-based games, some of this could be inferred, but here's what it looks like. You're taking a card. You can see this is step 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I think in the first session, I was saying maybe these are options, different ways you can use it, but I don't think so. I think now these are sort of steps. I think what it's saying here is, here's the pay symbol. I think this is saying we have to pay a wood to use this card. So we would have to go to our resources and pay a wood. Where does it go? It goes into the supply. I'll just move it up here for now. So we're paying a wood to use this card. The second thing that happens is we gain this resource. So we're paying a wood to gain a tower. Now, this seems to suggest that we should be taking it from here, not from the supply. Okay, this isn't to take two of them, this is step two. So if I had to guess, I would guess that we would take two from our pool and bring it into the tower supply, tower resource. Not taking it from the supply, but we could, and that's not 100% sure, but that's what this seems to be saying. Pay into here, take from our pool. All right, so that's the first thing. We've converted a weak resource into a strong resource. Now, the third step is to put this card into the grid. You can see it's a 3x3 grid. Again, this is going to be a bit of a table hog. Okay, and here are the rules for placing a card. It could go in a blank space. It can go on top of a card of the same color. It cannot go on top of a different colored card. So once you put a red somewhere in the grid, only reds can go up on there. So the second thing we would do with this card is put it somewhere in our 3x3 grid. We are going to run out of space quickly here, I can see. Let's just put it off to the side. Okay, that's step 3. Step 4 is to trigger the maze circle. And here's what it seems to be saying to me. It's saying we have these cards here. This is our resource engine. And it's saying we look at this card. We look at the color of the maze at the bottom. And that triggers which of these cards gets added to the black row. If it's a red maze, which it is, we must take from the far left end of the city row and add it to the far left of our black engine row. Now that's not, we've just got this little diagram to tell us all the rules for that. It's not 100% clear whether, if this wasn't a blue card, whether would it go on the left, might it shift over, but this seems very clear. If it's red that we play, then we trigger the leftmost card in our cities on our house row, and we bring it down here. Now, what that means that it's down here is something we can debate later. But we are going to be building this black card row up from this action. Every time we play a card into the grid, a card from the top is going to go added to this row here. And we can see a picture of cards on that row later. Here's a picture of cards that have accumulated down on this row, the black card row. Okay, so that's one thing you can do by playing a card. Alternatively, you can play a pawn into the grid. So this gets a card played into the grid and a card down on this row, the black card row. Instead of doing that, you could choose to place a pawn. And then here on the right side, we have all the rules for placing a pawn. So you can place it on these 4 spots. And you can see one spot deals with the left column 1, one spot deals with column 2, one spot deals with row 1, and one spot deals with row 2. That's the 4 places you can put the pawns. I believe these instructions are saying it's legal to place a pawn anywhere, except where another pawn already exists. That's what this is saying. You can't do that. Otherwise, you put a red, blue wherever you want. Once you put a pawn on a spot, it triggers all the cards in that row or column matching the color of the pawn. That's why this is grayed out. So when you put a red pawn here, it triggers these two red cards in this row. It triggers them, and then what happens when they trigger, we'll talk about in a second. But if you were to put this blue pawn here, it would trigger these two blue cards. Okay, so that's triggering. You're building cards into the grid, and then you can trigger them. You can fire them off. And when the cards fire off, that's when the middle section of these cards fire. So you could see if you choose to use a card this way, it fires off this resource conversion part in these corners, and it fires off this. You just use this bottom thing to decide where to place a card. So you don't use the rest of it. You don't use the center here. You don't use the center here. You don't use this. When you use a card this way, you just use these four corner resource conversions and the maze. But if you fire a card off this way, you trigger its middle part, and then you trigger its bottom part. Actually, three things you can do. You trigger the middle part, you trigger the bottom part, and if you want to, you can choose to upgrade the card. I believe that's what's happening here. So let's go over this for a second. The triggering of the middle is going to be discussed on a future page. The triggering of this bottom center is going to be discussed on a different page. This is explained right here. And I believe what it's saying here is you can spend this resource to upgrade the card by flipping it. So if we go find this card, it might be easier to confirm our theories. It's going to be a 1 card. Looks like it's probably this one. Okay, so this is in the grid. It's been triggered. And what are you doing? You're doing this stuff. Then you're doing this stuff. And then if you want, optionally, you can choose to upgrade it. So you would have to spend this super resource, which we might call a cube or companion cube. I think Rob was calling it. I'll call this one floppy disks and this one cubes. So we're spending into the pool one of the floppy disks, and we are flipping it into its upgraded state. A very common thing you might do in an engine builder. Notice there's no more pay this to get this. There's just an upgraded center. And that's what I think. Let's just make sure that makes some sense. So we've got one little disk here and one stone resource. And if you upgrade it, what have you turned it into? You've turned it in. How have you upgraded it? Well, you've upgraded this part to a 2. I think that's probably going to be score. This has changed. It's not that this has changed. These are the 2 corner pieces, and this is the entirety of the center. And I think when you upgrade it, this is now the entirety of the center. It's giving you, when you activate its center, you now get this thing also. So when we activate this card's center by putting a pawn, we get all the stuff in the center. And I think now with it upgraded, we're getting all this as normal, but we're also getting one of these upgraded tower resources, super towers, as well as doing this. Okay, but we can return to that later. But that's the upgrade option. All right, now, somewhat unusually, the explanations for this stage and this sorry, this stage of triggering the center and this stage 2 for this are not on the next page. They're actually discussed here, I believe. Okay, so let's do these in the order that they're described here. Action, step 1 is to do the center action. All right, so I believe this page is teaching us how to do center actions. And here is what it is saying. This we're going to need. This is our engine, one of our engines. This is our resource engine. Okay, so let me see if I can arrange this. Again, I'm presenting these things as I best have tried to figure them out. I'm not presenting them as known official things. All right, so let's take a look at what I think is happening here. Most of the center of these cards have this basic flavor. Notice it's not showing us this part. I believe this part here is the cost. So I believe we're going to have to spend a stone to actually do this. And then we would do this action, I believe. So this is saying spend a stone, spend 1 stone. So if we go back to our thing, we'd have to spend a stone. It's not clear here. It would be helpful if these instructions showed us that we have to pay for, but that's that. Then we do the center, which is explained here. There's lots of different centers on the different cards. But when it's triggered with a pawn, you do the center action. Okay, so what is this center? It matches this pattern here, which is a disc matching this outer circle here. This inner circle, I should say. It is telling us that this icon means we get to add a disc to a resource of our choice around this circle. Notice these are the blue and red civilizations working together. I think that's a little bit of a clue about the sort of cooperative nature. But in this example, the player has chosen to add a disc to the alien robot slaves. And that's showing here where it comes from. What is this? This is the pool. So it is saying we can take a disc from our pool and add it to our engine anywhere on this circle that we wanted, including we could stack it up here for stone. In their example, they're adding it to this alien slave. You'll see why you want to add resources to this engine in a second. So that's what this card would do, and then we'd be done. It's add 1 disc to any place of our choice on this double card here. That's what we're being shown here. And here you can see there's already a disc on this one. There's also a card that looks the same but has a circle in the middle. Can we find one of those? I suppose that I actually don't see one of those. I see a bunch that have a specific symbol in here. I assume that would mean we must give it to that symbol. Let me see if on the backs of any of these we have one matching this explicitly, or if we just have to... Okay, so I think maybe, I don't know why we're not given an example with that, but since we don't have actually any cards, oh, there's one right there. Okay. So here's an upgraded card with an actual matching this. All right, so what is that saying? It's saying, first, do this. This includes this. So it's saying, the person has put one token, one disk on any card of their choice around here. In this case, they've chosen to put one on this alien just like before. And then what happens? This center circle says, fire off the engine. When you fire off the engine, every disk on this card generates a resource. That's what we're seeing here. So I believe what's happening is this is doing just like this. It's putting a disk onto anything of our choice, and then we're firing off this engine, which is generating a stone and an alien onto our resource track. So in our case, step one is put a circle, a disk anywhere here we wanted. We choose to do this. Then this inner circle says fire off this engine, which doesn't take from here. You can see it's clearly taking from our pool. So we take 2 from our pool and generate a stone and an alien slave. So you can see why having cards here, having disks here, is helpful to fire off, to create resources out of them. Okay, there's that. There's that symbol. And in this one, it looks like we'd have to pay for it if we wanted to fire it off. Okay, but that's an upgraded card. All right, here's a more common case of just a symbol in the center. And you can see when that happens, we add 3 disks to that specified symbol from the pool. No, sorry, from the supply, not the pool. So from the supply. So if you triggered this card, you would get 3 stone from the supply. Right? And if you played this card, which is the one shown here, 3 wheat from the supply onto that resource. So these are all ways of generating resource, one directly from the supply and one indirectly by putting them on the engine and then from the engine generating into resource. The next kind of card that can be, next kind of thing that can be in the center is this symbol here. So this is one of the rows I'm not so super clear about. It seems for sure that it's saying take a card from your pool and put it on one of the cards in the grid. So when you activate a card with a pawn with this in the symbol, this one even has to be paid for by an expensive resource, so it's obviously powerful. It's telling us to put a disc on a card in the grid. Any card in the grid, I assume, and it's clear that it's coming from our pool. What's not as clear is what this is trying to say. Now, if I had to guess, I'd guess that it's saying that you can't have more than 4 stacked up on a card. It may be telling us put the discs at the bottom part. So if you imagine these are our cards in our grid, I think it's telling us that we take a disc from our pool, put it on one of these cards down at the bottom, possibly, and that we can't have more than 4. But this is the only time we ever see this symbol. It's not enough to really answer the question for us. it may be that it must go on a card with discs at the bottom. Like maybe we aren't allowed to put it on this card. We must put it on this card. Not clear. I believe we're going to see that this symbol is closer to meaning something like if it's empty. Okay. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to explicitly know the answer to that, but maybe we can figure it out. The next kind of thing that can be in the center is a maze. This one is expensive to pay for. Okay, let's see. What does the maze do? This is another card that I don't think is enough to deduce it, but we can try to guess. This seems to be the choose symbol. So if I had to guess what this is saying, I believe it's saying that we've been building up this black card row with city cards next to it on either side. I believe what it's saying is something like choose any card, and if it has a matching pair of the other color, then both trigger. And if I had to guess, I'd guess that it means that the inner parts of these trigger. That is, that we would, if we played a card and triggered its center maze, we would then say, okay, I'm going to choose to activate this. Maybe it must be a pair. And then their insides trigger. So sort of like a chain reaction. That would be my best guess, but I'm not clear on that. I'm not clear if the red has to be upgraded as shown in this example. I just don't know. And I'm not sure there's any way to know from the rules. We're just going to have to make our best guesses about that. This does feel like we're going to have a bunch of chain reactions, though. You could imagine if there was a maze inside this, that it would chain react. But I'm happy to hear. It's very possible that when this triggers, it doesn't actually do the center stuff, but it does something else, but there's no explanation for what it does. So this is one of my big mysteries. The last kind of thing that's in the center of these cards is the super resources. I don't see any on the front of the non-upgraded cards. Let's see if there's, yes. Okay, so on the upgraded cards, you see some of these symbols. And this seems to be the only way to get resources to upgrade these resources. So if you have one of these here, you could, when this triggers, this lets you move a token into its circular supply. I believe that what it's going to turn out is that these are the scoring spaces. And this is where you have to get discs to score them. Originally, in the first session, I thought these might be multipliers. Like if you have 5 of these, you put 1 here. But now I think they're actually scoring. So I think this movement is a way to bring a resource into a scoring space. Okay, continuing with our actions over here. We just learned how to fire off the center of cards when a pawn triggers them. The next step when a pawn triggers these cards is to fire off the lower center parts. And that's what this is teaching us. It's teaching us the 3 different ways that the lower halves of cards fire off. If it has this symbol, then I believe what it's saying is this card leaves the grid where it was triggered and goes into the row, the black card row. The example shows it going at the far left, but it is not clear what the rule for that is. Does it always go in the far left? Does it always go only where it can match someone? It does have a yellow, so it almost feels like it's saying that it has to attach to a yellow. So if you triggered this, would it have to go down like that? Unclear. Much more clear is the use of the stone cards at the bottom. So if it's a 1 stone, then you put 1 stone from the supply. This is the supply symbol. So if you trigger on a grid this card, it would say take a stone from the supply and add it to some card on our black row. If it's a 2 stone, then we add 2 discs. Sorry, if it's a 2 disc, we add 2. Now, is the rule that if it's a 1, it goes on the left, and if it's a 2, it has to go on the right? Or can we choose any card here? If I had to guess, I would guess you can choose any card or any of these. But again, the rules are not specific enough to answer that question. It's just not the way this is. It's not like a proper puzzle where we can deduce whether this means we can put a card anyway. We are going to have to just figure out which makes best sense for our game. My intuition is that we should be able to choose any card to put these on, because otherwise you're sort of locked in here. You can never take these off of here, and these would just accumulate. So I think it's going to let us put them anywhere. If I had to guess, I'd guess this would let us put it on the left or the right side also, but I really don't know. The last kind of symbol that can be at the bottom is a house. And I believe that what the house card is a different way to get a card down on the black row. So if you play this card, it means you did this card. If this card triggered in the grid, then this card itself jumps into this row. But if you trigger a house card in the grid, it's saying bring another one of your cards on the top city row down onto the black row. Does that make sense? It's a little awkward, but basically, when you trigger the bottoms, which remember are triggering from the grid, one symbol says remove from the grid to the black row, and one symbol says remove from the city row to the black row. We're always moving cards down into this final black row. All right, so there's how to trigger the bottom and how to trigger the center. And now we get into the harder middle pages of the rule book. So let me tell you what I think we're looking at here as a broad overview. I think we are looking at what to do between turns, including what triggers endgame and scoring. This is a weird thing. This almost seems like it's just giving us a catalog of symbols. This I don't understand, but I believe this is scoring. And I believe what we're seeing here is these 4 circles are what score. And I believe, well, I believe we're being told you get 7 points for each disc here, 12 points for each disc here, 6 points for each disc here. I was going to say no points for each disc here, but now I'm not so sure, because otherwise why would you want to put things here? Maybe you don't. So I thought this was empty. I'll explain why I think this means empty when we get to the end game between turn rules. But okay, so I'm not quite sure about this. If I had to guess, I think these are for scoring. All right. I don't understand this stuff up here. These just seem like a catalog of symbols. And I especially don't understand this. This might be saying something like you get a point for each disc on a card. I'm not sure. And then this seems to be saying 12 for the red city, maybe 9 for the blue city, but I don't understand why. And I don't understand this, or if this is connected to this. If I had to guess, I would say that these numbers here are telling us, remember we can stack cards on top of each other, right? So if I had to guess, I would guess that this is saying that there's 4 red cards in this pile. 2 blue cards here, 2 blue cards here, 2 red cards here. But I don't know what the consequence of that is. I don't know why that would be. It feels like it might be telling us that, like in this example, this configuration gave us this score that got added. But I don't really understand how you would get from this to this. And I'm a little confused that you're not that there doesn't seem to be a way of scoring the cards in this black row, which seem to be what you're trying to do. Although this might be saying something like you get a point for each. We can return to that, but that's the basic, that's my hypothesis that this is scoring. I believe this page and this page are telling us what to do between turns. And I'll tell you what I think it means for as best as I can figure out. Okay, so here is basically telling us here's what you do between turns. And it's a little flowchart. And I believe that this symbol that we're seeing so much of is basically telling us when it's empty, when this place is empty. So this part's a little hard for me to understand. If I had to guess, what I would guess is that this is an endgame condition and this is an endgame condition. This one's a little easier to understand. I think this is saying when the supply is empty, it triggers endgame. It triggers measuring the endgame. So basically, if this supply ever runs out at the end of your turn, you're triggering the endgame and you score it. But that there's another way to trigger endgame here. I'm not sure about that, though. But let's look at the rest of this. Yeah, maybe we need to rethink about this. Maybe when you have no towers, I'm not sure. Okay, but here's what happens when you have no more pawns left. When you have no more pawns left, you have to pay to remove the pawns on the board. That's what I believe this is saying. So after you've placed both of your, all of your available pawns to trigger the grid. Here's how you get pawns back off the grid. You can get one pawn back by spending either a wood or a grain. You can get 2 pawns back by spending any combination of stone and alien. You can get 3 pawns back by spending, sorry, 1. You can get 1 pawn back by spending a wood or a wheat. You can get 2 pawns back if you spend a stone or an alien slave robot, and you can get 3 pawns back if you spend a floppy disk or a cube. This is choose one. That's what I think. All right, that's how you get your pawns back. Now, here's what happens if your pool runs out. Not your supply, your pool, which has very much fewer disks in it. If your pool runs out, the first thing you do is you gain resources from your engine, it seems like. So you would look at your engine and you would trigger it. And this is showing that if this is what's on your engine, this is what you generate. So I believe you would generate a stone and an alien slave. But now I believe this is something closer to feeding your meeples, feeding your farmer in Agricola. I believe it's saying something like, not 100% sure, but I believe it may be saying something like, for each tower, we have to pay a wheat or an alien robot. Either that or we have to feed an alien robot each tower, something like that. If I had to guess, I'd guess for each alien tower, we have to pay a wheat or a robot. Or it's saying we have to pay a wheat to each alien robot who doesn't live in it, doesn't have a matching tower. Not clear. Although it may be that if we have no towers, you're kicked out of here. So not 100% sure. But then it seems to be saying, so this is my guess. You have to spend a wheat or an alien robot for each tower. Maybe we should consider this factory. If we call this a factory, then we're basically saying you got to either use wheat to fuel the factory, or you got to crush up an alien body into solvent green to power your factory. And then I think what this might be saying is, look, hey, if you have no aliens or wheat to feed your factories, you lose the factory. So that's what I'm guessing this sort of flowchart is saying. We must pay a wheat or an alien for each factory. If we don't have enough, we lose the factory. For each factory we can't feed, we lose the factory. Next step is we get into our pool 3 disks and a disk for every factory. That's my guess. That this is like the for every in this context. So step 3 would be you get 3 into your pool. And a disk for every factory. That's my guess. This is the gain symbol. Gain, gain. Now, where do they come from? These are clearly coming from the supply into your resources. This one, I don't think they're coming from the supply, from the pool. I think they're going into the pool, but it's not saying where they're coming from. I would assume they're coming from the supply, but you could make the case that they have to come from your resources. But I think it's just unspoken that they must come from the supply. Okay. And then what we've got here is, so this is if you have nothing left in your pool, is my guess. And now I think what it's saying is that regarding the red and blue city cards and the black card, I believe here's end condition if there's nothing left in the supply. I believe what this is saying is if you run out of city cards on your top row, shuffle up the 12 upgraded cards and lay them out. So that's my theory about how this works. We start by doing all the 12 level 1 cities according to this setup. And we put the level 2 upgraded second age of our civilization game over to the side. And I think what it's saying is when you finish all 12 of your first age civ cards, then you shuffle out your second age of civ cards, your level 3s, and you lay them out, and now you play and try to get those out. I think that's what this is saying. Now, what is this saying? I think it may be telling us, I'm not 100% sure what's happening here. This seems to be saying like choose a red or blue. I think it might be saying that we should do a black card action on the card that we've set aside here. So I think it's not clear. This part I'm not too clear about, but I think what this is saying, I think part of what this is saying about how to use these black cards is this. I think it's saying we have to pay this. I think it might be saying to choose one of these rows and then get this. I don't know how to pay this though. I don't know what this seems like pay 2 floppy disks, sure. I don't know how we pay this. And then we're gaining this. So we're getting to use we're getting the blue pawn. And I think what this is saying is when you've used up all 3 actions here, which would take you 3 turns, then you just store this card over here. And then I assume you would get the next one. But that is not 100% clear to me. And I think that's the full rules. Now you might wonder what this is. I'll tell you what I think this is. I think this is a score pad. I think when you score the game, this is your 6s, your 12s, and maybe your 36s if I had to guess. Power of 6. I believe this is just a little score pad. Like you would count, okay, my score is 6 plus 12 is 18, plus another 12, 30, and so on. That this is just how you would use, how the aliens would use to keep score. So there you have it. There's an hour and a half of me talking about my current theories of the rules and where I don't understand. But I haven't covered everything I don't understand. Let's take a break. We'll come back in 8 minutes and I'll go over my list of things that I don't have a good grasp of, most of which we've covered, but not all. I'll see you in 8 minutes. We'll go over that. And then if you have some other ideas, I'd love to hear them. I'll see you in 8 minutes. All right, we're back to talk about City of Six Moons and the stuff that I don't understand. Sarah, you're on camera. All right, let's go over the things I don't have a good grasp of, and then we're going to spend some time talking with the chat to hear about any thoughts about what I might have gotten wrong or any thoughts about the areas that I'm particularly confused about. All right, let me get my list here. See if I can make sense of it. First area that I'm confused about, not sure about, is this, which I think is scoring. It's not just that I don't know how to read this part of the scoring. It's that this confuses me. Like, is that a number there? Or does that mean you don't get any points for that? I'm not sure. I don't understand this. I don't understand if this is connected to this. And I don't understand this. Furthermore, there are things that it seems like you clearly should get scoring for, like bringing these cards down and putting discs on cards. I don't know what that's good for. I don't know what that does for you. Seems like it should be related to scoring, but I don't see how, unless this might be saying something like you're getting points for every red and blue city down on the black row or anywhere. Maybe you get a point for each stone. Not clear. I've said already that I'm not 100% sure whether this is saying put these items on this card so that you can use them, or put them here and then move them here. I think it must be that you should put them here and then use them. Why are there 5 houses here on this card? I don't know. It does say when you're done with it, you put it down in this row, in this grid. So it makes me think again that maybe you're getting these, maybe on every house card you build in the grid or on the black row, maybe you count up the house symbols for them. Not clear. This symbol, this number on the bottom right of red cards and on the bottom left of blue cards, which seems to range from 1 to 6. I don't know what that's for. Nowhere is it used or shown being used anywhere. It doesn't trigger when you use the bottom part of a card. That makes me think it probably should be points. Does it make sense that it's points? Why would this card be worth 6 and this card only be worth 1, even though they're both level 1 cards, where we have level 4 cards which are only worth 2 or 1? Is it particularly hard to get down there? Is there any logic between when a card has only a 1 and when it has a 6 or when it has a 5? Can we see any logic to it? Not really. I can't see any logic. And it's not to do with color. Okay, so the scoring rules, and this I don't understand. And I don't understand exactly why you would put discs on cards. I don't fully understand this action. It seems to be saying we choose a card. It seems to be showing them melded. I don't understand the constraints for melding, and I don't understand what it does for you. What does this do? Does it chain trigger the centerpieces actions? Does it generate points? I don't know. Okay. What else? I don't understand fully these black cards, how to use them. It definitely seems to me like here are the instructions. And I kind of get the impression that these are 3 separate actions you can take, and that maybe you're only allowed to choose one between every turn. So it feels like the person has chosen this top row and maybe paid this to get a pawn. But what do these two, if that's what's happening, if you're paying this to get this, this would be clear. You pay 2 floppy disk resources. But what is this? Is it possible that this is saying take 3 stones off white cards? Is that why you're building stones on the white cards, so you could use them purely to power this? You can see how useful this is, because this 6 thing gets 6 cards, 6 discs into your supply, and the pawns can trigger. But so is this a one action once between turns? You can do one of these. It's clear when it's empty, it goes here, but then do you flip the next one? And what happens if you run out? Do you just keep playing? And what do these mean? The only time we have yellow cities seem to be like the yellow city symbol seems to be on here. Although that's not really yellow city, is it? That's a yellow background and a black city. So, you know. I don't understand if this is scoring, what this means, if that's not most of the time I think that's being used to say if the space is empty. I don't fully understand these rules, although I've made a pitch for what I think they kind of do, a little upkeep feeding type thing. And that in this cases it means if it's empty, but I don't know how that explains this part. And I've explained how I think it means if it's empty on the row of house cards, then you can bring up the next set of 12. I guess that's almost it. I think I also have a little bit of confusion about this here. And I wonder if this isn't just for keeping score. So you can see here that it seems to be saying that everything in here is worth 12. That's my guess. Now notice how these top 3 have holes in the top, but this has a hole in the bottom and it's connected to this one. But what I want you to notice even more importantly is that if you look at the cards, there's ways to gain tower resources or factory, however we want to call that. Okay. There's ways to gain the super floppy disks and regular floppy disks. And there's ways to okay, all of those. But notice that, so here's gaining a circle factory and gaining a circle floppy disk, which are sort of the deluxe versions. But notice nothing is getting us any disks into this area. There are no cards that instruct us to ever take from or put into that symbol. And yet, this almost seems to be saying that that's what we should pay for from here, although it doesn't have a circle. So I'm sort of wondering if, and in our example, we don't see any tokens in there, but I'm sort of wondering if unspoken on these rules, that either this is just scoring or is it one of these things where these get automatically moved into here? Or is this have to do with this and this? Like, are we somehow adding to this? Or is this just a reminder of something? But we don't seem to have any way to get things in and out or out of there. And yet this seems to suggest that it's an important part of scoring. And this seems to suggest that these two are connected. All right, I think that's where I am here. 2 hours in. I've explained what I can figure out. All right, let me see if I, hold on, before I turn to the chat, let me, there's been some joking about how I keep reading the chat and saying, I don't get it. And the truth is that it's very common for me to read the chat while we're playing and someone be trying to say something and I just can't grok it. I can't grasp it. And sometimes I yell at the chat to try to say complete sentences. But let me just once again try to summarize why it's so hard for me to follow what you're saying and why you have to try hard to speak as if you're talking to a brain damaged 5-year-old. There's a bunch of things that I'm doing at the same time that are taxing my attention. And it's sort of overloading to look over at the chat and see 20 messages to catch up on. And each of you have your own train of thought that you're talking about between each other interleaved. And frequently, if you're answering a question that I've asked, 2 minutes ago, so you have to try really hard to explain what you're saying in a way that I'll get it if you want me to understand it. Now, most of the time you guys can just talk to each other and you can do it however you want. But it is a struggle for me to follow, and maybe I need to try better to just take a moment and pause and try to understand it. But it's difficult because I can't ask you to clarify, because by the time you clarify, a minute has gone by. All right, so let's try to look at the chat. But try to write your comments, if they're directed at me, as like full, clear comments, as clear as you can possibly make them. All right, I'm going to skip down to here. Let's see. The number on the corner is probably just used as a card reference. No, I don't think that makes any sense. There are lots of times when you have a card reference and you have a unique number in every card, but that's not what we've got here. I'm not sure what's required. The way the black cards are set up, it seems like it's a variable setup for resource generation. I agree with that. But that's what this part is. Randomly picking these cards and then randomly using the rest of these. This is a variable setup. This is your variable setup, and that's its purpose. Arsene says, Isar says, I have a question. What does the circle between the two bigger circle symbol, top left page in the rule book mean? If you're talking about this, I believe this is just saying this is what you do between turns. This is a turn, and this is between turns. You can see, here's your turn. Your turn is to either use a card or play a pawn, and then between turns, you do this check. Pay for, which is basically, everything here is basically just saying, here's what happens when places are empty. When you have no more pawns, you do this. When you have no more in your pool, you do this. When you have no more in your supply, you do this. End the game. When you have no more cards, you do this. So that's what that is. Turn action and what to do between turns. Arsene says 12 is the max between the red and the blue values shown just below. I'm talking about page 5. Okay, yeah, you really have to say what you're talking about. 12 is the max between the red and blue values. Okay, so I don't understand what you're saying. Now, do you want to try to explain a little better what you're saying? Let's try this as an experiment. I'll just keep this up and we'll live with the delays and we'll try to get this statement clarified. 12 is the max between the red and the blue values shown just below. Don't understand. See if you can clarify. So there's some red and blue here. There's some red and blue here. There's some red and blue here. There's a 12 here. The number associated with the city-state in the bottom circle is 12. The number associated with the city-state in the bottom circle is 12. The number associated with the city-state in the bottom circle is 12. Okay, I can see that. Just below, you see two values associated with the red and blue city-states. Okay, I see that. Now, what are you trying to say? 12 is associated with this circle, okay? And then here we have a red 12 and a blue something, which we think might be 8. There may be a relationship. Okay, well, I agree that this is 12, but this seems to be points. To me, this is how I read this. Is the word measure or points. I think this is saying 12 points per, but what this is saying, I don't know. And I think this 4 here is just saying like this is stage 4 scoring, but I'm not sure. Okay. So if it's true that this is scoring, I wonder if this is saying something like you get 1 point for every disc, you get 1 point for every disc, for every resource. This might be resource because it looks like it's a whole bunch of these combined, which are your resources. So I wonder if this is saying like you get a point for every disk, a point for every resource, a point for every resource in one of these. Maybe a point for every cities, for every house symbol anywhere on the board. You don't get points for these? Not really. What if this is saying, here's an idea. Okay, so I've been saying, why do you put discs on cards? There's a couple different times when you can put discs on cards, right? What if this is saying that you multiply like the city symbols times the discs that are on a red or blue card? Seems a little odd though. Like why would you not always try to put all your discs on? If you ever built a 4, wouldn't you put all your discs on that card to get that multiplicative value? But I do, having said that, let me draw attention to the perhaps the most intriguing aspect of figuring out the rules here. And that has to do with that little implicit assumption that it's a reasonable game. That does constrain solutions, right? Like if I tell you, I think this rule means you multiply the discs times the number of cities, we're not going to find that invalidated by an explicit rule, but we might decide that that's invalidated because it would break the game. It would make the game strategy not make sense. So maybe that's the last piece of the puzzle of figuring out what rules mean, is trying to say, what's a consistent explanation of the rules that creates interesting decisions? And if there's a certain action you would never take because of our interpretation of the rules, then it would mean that that can't be a consistent interpretation of the rules. So I've done a bunch of things I don't understand. I wonder if it would pay to try to focus on them, or whether we should try to play a game and try to see if we can figure it out. Maybe that would make the most sense, since no one is chiming in with other things. Well, okay, let's think about this. We've got some options. We could stop here after 2 hours and let people chew on this. And then for our next session, we could try to play a game. Or we could try to play a game right now. It's not going to be easy to play a game on this table. It's such a table hog. But let me try to reset everything. It's possible by playing the game, we'll see where it breaks, and thus must require modifications to our theory of the rules. I think that's a promising idea. All right, I'm going to reset everything here. We're going to try playing this game as best we can, and we're going to see where the cracks show up. Do we understand the clear objective of the game? I don't understand the objective. Well, that's actually a great question, because one of the things that came in the Discord was discussion of how do you win? How do you lose? And my conclusion from the rule book goes something like this. Eventually you score. That's how you play the game. And you know what this may mean? This may be the instant loss condition. In fact, I think that's what it is. I think if you ever have no factories, you lose. That's the instant loss. You get no score. Otherwise, it's not a matter of victory. It's just a matter of you play until you run out of discs in the supply, then the game ends and you score. That's it. There's no victory. It's simply a matter of when you can't play any more discs, the game ends and you score it. And now I think this is an instant end loss condition. I think if you have no more factories, you lose. And here's a way to lose factories. If you can't sacrifice some wheat and an alien slave for each factory, you lose a factory. And so on. So this is a instant loss. Everything else is just you play till you run out of discs in the supply. That's my theory. All right, let's do a setup. Let's try to figure out where we're going to play this game, how we're going to fit this on our table. I would kind of like to have a place to put our 3x3 grid. Let me see if I can. Not really gonna fit here. Could use some blank playing cards. Do we not have any blank playing cards? Rather have really blank playing cards. That's not gonna work. All right, I know. Just use stickers. All right, we need a grid. We're gonna put the grid over here, I think. So I'll make stickers for that. We're gonna keep this in the center. We're gonna use our black row down below. And we're gonna use our white row up here. Grid, cards, black row. Grid, city, cards, black row. Okay. Let's see if we can make this fit. Okay, our upgraded cards we don't need for now. Them way out of the way. Let's clear our workspace as much as we can. All right, I'm shuffling this deck up. I guess we're going to walk through the rules here. So, first instruction, shuffle this deck white side face up, lay them out randomly, all 12. Clear our space here. And we might as well move these up as far up as they can go. Okay. Next step, we're taking our 4 cards, we're shuffling them. We're using 2 for resources, and we're going to use 1 as our starting stuff. This is probably a little bit of a clue here. So let's keep that. Let's keep that choice because that seems like this might be a clue. Okay, and then 6 discs, and they've got the factory symbol on it. That's a very interesting thing. 6 discs of factory. Okay. Then we're taking these 2 cards and we're putting this red and blue down below. That's our engine, I'm calling our black row. That's going to get built out. So maybe I need to put that over here somewhere. All right, so we've done this. And now we have to initialize this. So if we were, maybe we will follow it this way. Okay, here, we'll do it that way. Okay, so now we get a resource for every symbol around here. So we've got 1 wheat, 1 alien, another wheat, a stone, a wood, another alien, and we started with wheat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we get to choose one of these that we want to start our engine with. Let's follow the rules. Let's follow the example and start out by upgrading our stone engine, which also gets us an extra starting one there. Then the rules tell us to give ourselves 3 factory discs, which I'm doing here. 6 discs in our pool. These are important. We don't want to run out of these too quickly. That's what we're using to do things. And then the supply. And then it says to put the pawns by this near the supply ready to use. That's how I'm interpreting it. Okay. Now we're going to take an action. We're either going to put a pawn on the grid or we're going to play a card. But we have no grid built yet, so surely we're going to use a card. So I'm going to assume we can use any card we want. Now, what's going to happen when we use that card? We're going to pay the upper left, and we're going to gain the lower right. Now, what do we want to gain and why? We're not quite sure. And we're going to put this card into the grid where we can trigger its center action. So let's try this. We've got a stone engine. We've got 2 stone. We don't have much wood, so I'm thinking we'll take a card that that pays for with stone that is easy to upgrade. Let's try this one. No, actually, I'd rather take one that generates our... Okay, let's try this. So I've chosen this card. I'm going to pay with 1 stone, which comes from here. Remember, this is our engine. We don't take things off here. I'm going to pay for it with 1 stone into the supply. That's our first thing we've done. The second thing we do is we're gaining this. So we're gaining from the pool. I wonder now if, like, it seems like things are going to come out of this pool too fast. Like we're going to run out of cards. Maybe it's only when you gain these that they come out of here. Maybe if you gain from here, they don't come out of your pool. But let's try. Well, I guess it just feels like we're going to run out of this pool so quickly. But all right, let me try taking it out of the pool. So we're gaining a tower from the pool, into the tower here. I'm not going to differentiate between these. I'm just going to keep it here so it's easier to remember. So I'm following this rule to gain ourselves a factory tower. I'm taking it out of the pool, even though I'm not so sure whether that's where we should take it from. The third step is to move it into the grid. So I'm going to move this into the grid, 3x3 grid. We'll just start that grid over here. And we'll do like this. All right, I've decided to put it here in the grid. I could put it anywhere, but I'm going to put it here. It's a red card. It can go on a blank space. The last thing I'm going to do is going to look down here. It's red. So I believe that means that the farthest card here on the left goes to become part of the black row. To the left of the black row. Not entirely sure why we want that, but there we are. We've done a turn. It's kind of exciting. We've done a turn. Okay. Now we're at the between turn stage. So we would check, do we have no towers? If so, no factory towers, we would lose the game. That's my reading of the roll. Do we have no pawns? No, we've got 2 pawns. I don't think we count these. Well, maybe we do. But we have 2 pawns, so that doesn't trigger. We still have discs in the pool, so this doesn't trigger. The feeding every week doesn't trigger. Now we look here. If we had no more cards here, we would bring out the next age. But we do, so nothing happens. And we still have cards in the supply, so none of this end stuff triggers. But I believe we could do this. I'm just not sure how. Now, I was saying that this feels like a little clue. Like, is this saying we have to pay 1 of each resource to trigger this? Or are these not payments? I'm not sure. But it doesn't look like we can do any of that. So now we're on to another turn. Now we could trigger one of these, but it seems like we might want to try to build this up a little more. So let's do another card action. Let's try to get more engine building going on here. How about we, everything is expensive to upgrade, but this thing feels like it could upgrade. Let's do this one. All right, so I've chosen this card. We must pay a wood. So I'm going to pay the wood. It goes into the supply. We get a tower and a wheat. It's a circle. Surely it can't keep coming from the pool. It feels like that would end so quickly. But if it doesn't come from the pool, when does it? What would come from the pool? This would bring from the pool, and this would bring from the pool. You know what? I'm going to say that when you gain this way, you don't gain it from your pool. So we already took one from the pool. I'm going to put it back. But there's, if we're keeping track of our primary questions, one of them is, does this come from the pool or from the supply? I'm going to start reading it as coming from the supply. All right, I'm going to undo it. I'm going to take it from the, I am going to take it from the pool. So I'm going to take two more here from the pool, one into our wheat and one into another tower. So I'm going to run this out quicker so we can see how that works. So I've paid this, I've gained this, and now we're going to put it into the grid, and I'm going to, oh, it's a blue card. That was a mistake. That was a mistake. I'm going to undo that because we're trying to learn these rules, and I want to trigger things at the same time. I'm going to take my wood back. I'm not going to take this. I'm going to take a red card. Okay. Let's try this nice, big, powerful one. Okay, so here we go again. Spending wood, spending stone, gaining from here an alien slave, a wheat, and a tower. And I'm going to put it here. I spent those go in here. And then this is a red, so another card goes down here. And it doesn't have to be a red card, so it could be a blue card. It's red, it must come from here. Okay, so this card comes this way. That's how we're reading it. Although it does seem like we've made a little meld here. All right, next turn again. Everything's fine. We still have cards in the pool, so nothing triggers. We could do this if we knew how. So now we go to our next turn. But now we're going to try to use this action. So I'm going to place the red pawn to trigger this row of reds. So now we're following these rules. I'm triggering both of these. The first thing that happens is their middles trigger. We've already got a problem. This seems to suggest that I have to pay a stone, but I don't have a stone. The rules don't even tell you about this top stuff here. But it seems to suggest that I have to pay a stone to trigger this, I'm assuming. Actually, though, this example does not, this example shows this card, but doesn't really show it being done. Let's just cheat our way around it and assume we had a stone. All right, so following these rules, we would pay a stone. I guess if we couldn't pay it, we wouldn't be able to trigger it. But we're going to cheat a little bit. We're going to say we can pay the stone to trigger this action in the center, which we believe is this action here, which lets us put one disc from the pool onto any resource we want that we want to generate more of. I guess wood might be good for us. We're low on wood. So I'm going to put it on wood here. That's this done. This one lets us gain a tower and a wheat. Just straight off gain a tower and a wheat. Presumably, well, is it from the supply? It's not really clear. Or is it from the pool? Because we don't have enough things in the pool. It really feels like things are leaving the pool too quickly. I think it's going to turn out that they only come from the pool on these actions, and the rest of them, if it doesn't say it comes from the pool, then it doesn't. That makes a little more sense to me. All right, so I'm going to give us a tower and a wheat from the pool. All right, so I've done the first part of triggering a row. Now we could pay to upgrade these cards, but we don't have any of those resources, so we can't afford it. And now we do the bottom. In this case, we're allowed to put one disc from the supply on a card. I guess I'll put it here. And two discs from the supply onto a card. Could be the same card, could be a different card. That's assuming this means we can put it anywhere and not one has to be on the left, one has to be on the right. And that's the end of that turn. Now we go here. Everything is the same. The only way it seems to get cards into here is by doing this action here, which we don't know how to get. So we'd like to get some floppy disks if we can. Here's a way to get floppy disks. But we don't have any wood, so we can't purchase that one. We'd like to generate our engine. How do we do that? I guess it's going to happen automatically for us when we run out of these. So we should try to trigger that and that upkeep phase in a minute. All right, so we're going to take a card and we're going to, maybe we'll try, no, that requires us to pay 2 floppy disks. We're not in a situation for that. Let's try to use a different card though. Let's try to use, that requires a floppy disk, but just to use it, not to pay for it. Wood. Stone we're out of. Wood, stone. Wow, we're in a little bit of trouble because we don't have any wood. I suppose we could trigger with a pawn then. Since we don't have a good card to play, since we can't pay wood or stone, we're going to have to trigger our pawn. But it's not going to work. It has nothing to trigger, so I've played pretty poorly here. Unless we think I could get this red pawn, but I don't think so. All right. God, so many towers. That seems like that was a bad decision. Okay, let's try to cheat a little bit so that we can do something. I'm going to give myself an extra... I don't want any more towers. I'm going to give myself that. Okay. Let's get a blue card out. All right, so I'm going to choose this card here. I'm going to pay 1 wood and 1 alien slave. We're going to gain an alien slave and a tower. That's stage 1 and stage 2. I took from here, but I don't know if that was the right thing to do. Let's just pretend we used up the last pool so we can see how that part works. Stage 3 is to put it in the grid. I'm going to put it right there. And then because it's a blue card, we're going to add a card to the right side here. We're not exactly sure why, but I'm going to, sorry, it has to be the last card. That goes there. All right, but here is the interesting part now. Now we're getting to the end round upkeep, and things are going to happen. We have plenty of towers. We have pawns, but we have no more discs in our pool. So, first stage is to generate our engine, it seems to me. We have a stone and a wood engine, so they generate. We generate 1 stone and 1 wood. Next step is, here's the problem. According to me, my reading of the rules, for every tower, we have to pay, sacrifice on the altar an alien slave robot, or feed it a wheat. So we've got 7 factories to feed. Do we have to do them? I don't know. But if we had to do them, we could actually spend all of our wheat and all of our robot slaves to pay for all 7 of these. But I'm going to say we don't dare do that. That's clearly was a bad idea to build so many towers. But let's say we want to keep these and spend 3. I'm starting to doubt that rule. It seems so harsh. But okay, let's imagine we spend a combination of 3 from our wheat and our alien slaves. And then according to my rule, for each one we couldn't, we lose a tower. So basically we paid for 3 and we lost 4 that we couldn't feed. Then we get 3 more discs into the pool, and we get a disc for every factory, which is 3. So if we had, maybe we would have been better off keeping another factory alive by sacrificing a robot or a wheat. Then we would have more discs in our pool. All right, and now we begin again, although we're going to run out of pawns soon, and we're going to have to figure out how to do this to get more pawns. Although I guess we can get our pawns back. Now, we've now played around, including the upkeep stage. There's a little bit of concern about running out of this pool happening too quickly. And we gain factory, but we have a hard time paying for factory. So it does seem like wheat and robots are a good thing to build up in your engine. Now you are going to get stronger as you build this engine here, but when the engine triggers, it comes from your pool. That's a very weird thing. But okay, the more factories you have, the bigger your pool can get. That is tempting. Like if we had spent 2 more, they would go into the pool. We'd have 2 more in the pool. Now I have more cards in the pool, but we don't spend from the pool. We spend from here. All right, so what seems broken about our playthrough? What seems broken? This seems a little odd. Not totally not totally unworkable, but a little bit odd. And it's a little bit odd to think that every time we gain, we're gaining from our pool instead of our supply. We don't know how to do this. And we don't know why we've put discs on these cards and what what is this getting us? Like putting cards here is clearly getting us stuff. We can trigger them and use them. But is this just for scoring? That's a weird situation. There's only one thing that we know that shows how to use these cards. All right, this should be on now. And that's this action here. Well, let's try to do that and see what happens. See what makes sense to us. So I want to bring this card out into my row. So for my next turn, I'm going to take this card. I have to spend a wood, and I gain a floppy disk, which I'm going to take from our pool and give us the floppy disk resource. Then I'm going to put this into the grid, and I'm going to put it here so that we can trigger these both. And then because this is blue, the rightmost card here goes out here. And we've got another combo here. All right, that's it for that turn, and then the upkeep is fine. Now on my next turn, I'm going to use this blue. I'm going to put it here. I'm going to trigger both of these blue cards. Okay, so how do we do that? First, we trigger the centers, and now we've got two new symbols to deal with in the middle. So middle card, this symbol, it feels like we have to do this first, which we can do because we have a floppy disk. I guess we have to spend that. It's very expensive. Okay, then we do this action. This action lets us take a disk from our pool and put it on any card here, perhaps? We don't know what that does for us, but I'll just put it on this card. Where do you think it has to be on the card that triggered? And we don't know what this means. I think this might mean, although it's showing a blue card, so I don't know. Maybe it's saying you can't put it on blue cards. Maybe the disc has to go on a red card, but why would that be? I mean, that would make sense that this is saying it can't go on a blue card. Okay, now we trigger this. Now this says we have to pay. Oh, this isn't a floppy disk. This is a cube. All right, well, let's just pretend it came from the cubes. We can't pay for this, so I guess we can't do it, but let's pretend we could. And let's try to trigger this. This is a rule we don't understand, and it's here. It seems to suggest that we can choose a card here or here. Choose a pair of cards, choose a card, and we trigger it and its meld. But what do we do when we trigger it? It doesn't say. This feels like it's the most glaring absence of rules, the most clearly missing an explanation of what happens. This pretty clearly means choose everywhere else we've seen it. So it feels like it's saying choose a card and combine it. But then what does it want us to do? I mean, it is in the center of the card. So does it mean that I now trigger this and this? That's the only thing I can think of. So if that was the case, we would gain a robot slave. No, I don't think this is gain. I think this is saying I can trade a robot slave for a floppy disk. That's what I think this transfer is. Maybe you have a hard time seeing. I think this double circle looks like it's this symbol. So I'm thinking it might mean this is how you convert. So I'm going to use that to mean that I convert a robot into one floppy disk, which is what I'll do right there. And then trigger this one, which generates a wood or lets me adds 3 wood is what it does from the supply. So that's quite powerful if that's what it does. If that's what this does. No, we have no way to upgrade a card once it's on this black row. The only way to get upgraded cards in here is to bring them out here, upgrade them here, and then use this action to bring them from the grid into here. Now we're out of pawns. So between rounds, we could see how this works. Between rounds, we should follow the instructions as we go down. We still have these, so that doesn't matter, but we're out of pawns. Okay, so now if we wanted to get our pawns back, according to me, we can have a pawn back for every wood we spend, or if we spend a stone, we could have 2 back. But it feels to me like maybe we would be better off spending 2 stones since we have so many of them to get back. But maybe we're only allowed to do it one at a time, but I'll just take both of them back. All right, so we've had to cheat a little bit to get unstuck. So that's a good sign that I was making mistakes which ground my engine to a halt. But we could basically see that every time this runs out, there's an upkeep stage which refills our pool. And our pool does dwindle down to 0 eventually, because once they get put out on cards, they never come back. So eventually you are going to run out of discs. That will trigger the end of the game. You could see we could build up our engine of factories, which get us more in the pool. But we also have to pay for that, and we run a risk of having our factories run out if we can't pay for them. Eventually, the game ends. If it ended here, according to me, these would generate 0 since we've got none in here. But we don't know how to score this. And we don't know how to score this. So I can't say that playing a sample round really helped us figure out any rules. If anything, they raised this main question I had about every time we gain, do we really gain from the pool? But I think that's right. I think you do gain from the pool every time. It really feels like your pool is running out quickly. But it's not the end of the world when it runs out. But you do have to pay for wheat and to pay for your factories. Yeah, I don't think the cheating was required because of the rules. I think the cheating was required because bad strategy. I think. So we still got our glaring elements of confusion though. How to trigger this? I mean, is this pay for this? Does seem like pay this for this, and this is saying pay one of each resource. But I'm not sure. It could be. So we don't know how to do that for sure. We don't know what these black arrows mean, and we don't know what having discs on cards mean. It's clear that having discs on cards brings the game to an end eventually because it gets rid of cards, but we don't know why you'd want to do that. Maybe you wouldn't want to do it. And it seems like you would want to, but then, and then maybe this rule is simply saying that the blue cards don't get discs. If I had to guess, we don't know exactly what it means to trigger these things. But if I had to guess, I'd guess the discs on cards are just for scoring. But it simply can't be that you get like a do we ever put more than one disc on a card? Yes, this shows them putting 2 discs on this card. And this card has 2 discs. All right, so it's not merely a matter of saying not merely a matter of saying once you have a disc there, it's active. And we don't see any correlation between the number of pips and anything else. Like you might expect you have to pay more to activate it. My intuition is that these have to do with points, end game points. But and then discs might have to do with qualifying for end game points. Any thoughts from the chat? Racine says, I think the red and blue scores are calculated from the tokens on cards. It's not a crazy idea. What would the max of the two seems to be the score associated with the house symbol. I really have no comprehension of how you're deciding that something is telling us about max. I do not understand where you are making that leap of logic. But you could imagine that it's saying that every red card is worth 12 and every blue card is worth 8. I just don't, that just seems crazy. So it feels to me like this is telling you about the value of the card. There has to be some reason you want to put discs on cards. And what is that doing to their value? It's clearly not doing anything to their actions. It's not doing anything that helps you use the cards. It's just doing something for score. Let's look at these card arrows again and see if we can make any sense out of why one card will have a 1 and one card would be worth so much more. Here's a card. This one has worth a 1, this one worth 5. They're both level 1s. The backs are the same as the fronts. There's another level 1, level 1, level 2. What logic is there in that? Is there ever a disc that's worth a lot? Yes, that double disc is worth 6. If that's indeed what that 6 means. I think that's got to be the value of it. What else could it mean? What else could it mean? It could mean that this is just a level 5 difficulty card, and this is a level 1 difficulty card. Could just be informational. It doesn't feel like it, though. So common in an engine building game would be something like the powerful cards would be worth less points at the end, and the cards that do nothing might be just pure value. Do we have any sense of that happening? Not really. I wonder if this isn't just telling us do we ever have a red card that has discs on it? Yes. I was thinking maybe it was going to say that only blue cards regain the discs on them, and red cards are worth more. I wonder if this isn't just saying you get a point for every disc on a card. But then why would you put discs on some cards and not others? That's the question. Why would you care about what discs you put cards on? That's the case. And we still haven't answered how things get here. There's no upkeep that does that. Huh? Tony says, pure strategy game. How does just scoring make it satisfying? Not understanding the motivation to even play this. Well, it's a solitaire game where you're trying to get the best score. And Star says, I guess it's because of how the game is being played based on choice. Another point I have is that those red and blue circular patterns, do you need to choose cards to align with each other? Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. It seems like there's a benefit. Seems like this is suggesting some sort of combination. I'm reading this like if you choose a card that's connected to its matching partner, then they both trigger. This is sort of a symbiosis thing, but I don't know. I mean, in some sense, this seems like the most interesting part of this puzzle, trying to infer, given that you know there's two different places where you put discs on cards, that there has to be some value to that. One is white banded. The card next to it is yellow banded. Yeah, on this rule, you mean? I mean, we didn't do any upgrades, but you can do upgrades. It definitely makes it a more powerful card in its center abilities. It's pretty weird that we have this engine in this grid that we can trigger. Then we have the engine on the black card row that we can trigger. I wonder, okay, so here's an interesting idea. What if it's saying that this is a bad thing? You have to put a disc on a card, and then maybe you won't be able to put a card on top of it anymore. Is it possible that it's saying that this is a punishment? You have to put a disc on a card. Once you do, nothing can go on top of that again. That's an interesting interpretation of this rule. However, if I had to guess, I would guess that I now would guess that this is saying you cannot put tokens on blue cards. The example shows it putting on a red card. This seems to be saying no can contain tokens. So if I had to guess, I would guess it's saying that you cannot put discs on blue cards in the grid. And that means that the red cards, once you put a disc on, possibly can't be upgraded. Can't be put on top of. And that maybe the red and blue are asymmetric in ways we don't quite understand. Hey, look at this. Look at this layout. It's the same layout as this. That seems like the same layout here. This seems like an example, but is it trying to suggest that this is the strict layout? Every example shows this exact layout. That's either a poor choice or it's suggesting that this is how it must be. Or this is just saying at the end of the game, this is what this player got. Because you can see, like, there are tokens here suggesting how this person ended the game. So well, I guess we're going to wrap it up here after 3 hours. And I think I may go on Board Game Geek and read what other people have to say. There are people who have put a lot of hours into this game. I don't know if I feel like I've gotten most of the joy out of this that I'm going to get. But I am curious how you would solve these last little puzzles. Well, if you've got some thoughts, if you have City of Six Moons, if you've worked on it, if you have different ideas than I do about certain rules, I'd like to hear it. Even more so, I'd love to hear if you've got rules for the pieces that I don't. The use of the black cards, the value of putting discs on, and the scoring, and any changes to my end game or feeding of the upkeep stage. I'm dying to hear it. All right. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.